Before the zombie outbreak, I found a mountain shelter built by a retired general. I am 3 hours past the last gas station when I see the turnoff. Not on my tablet, not on the county printout, not on the old fire access map folded on the passenger seat. I stop the truck in the middle of the cracked road and back up 20 yards until the front bumper lines up with a patch of alder and loose stone. There it is, a narrow cut in the slope, half hidden behind brush somebody planted on purpose a long time ago. The gravel under it is packed hard, older than the fresh washouts higher up, and there is a drainage ditch on the uphill side that has been kept clear by somebody who understood water and concrete. Nobody puts work into a dead road for no reason. I kill the engine, step out, and listen. Wind in the pines. Water moving somewhere below. Nothing mechanical. Nothing human. I stand there another few seconds anyway, staring up into the trees and trying to decide whether I am about to waste an hour or find something that is going to make paperwork ugly. The contract I am working is simple on paper. Inspect a string of abandoned mountain access roads for a timber company that wants to reopen some of them for future logging and fire control. I photograph washouts, mark culverts, note slope failure, estimate what a dozer can reach and what it cannot. Most days it is dust, old gates, and faded survey pins. This stretch in the mountains west of town is supposed to be low priority. Half the roads up here were cut in the 1970s, used hard for 10 years, then left alone when the mill closed and the county stopped pretending it had money. I am supposed to check 2 switchbacks, 1 creek crossing, and a bridge deck that may not exist anymore. I am not supposed to find a hidden spur road with fresh ditch work. I grab the camera, rangefinder, and my sidearm from the seat. I carry the pistol when I am in bear country and when I work alone. I do not think it solves much, but it keeps one category of problem from becoming a certain funeral. The spur road climbs at a shallow grade, tucked under trees that block it from the main line. Somebody cut the branches years ago, then let them grow back in a controlled way. That is what catches me first. This is not neglect. This is concealment. Even the ruts are wrong. They are old, softened by time, but the road base underneath still holds. Halfway up, I see broken concrete culvert ends under moss and a retaining wall poured into the hill with aggregate that matches nothing else in this district. I stop again and crouch by the road edge. There is rebar in that wall. Heavy stuff. Private money heavy. The spur ends in what should be a dead turnaround, but it is not dead. The hill opens into a shallow shelf and a concrete face set into the slope. Not a cabin foundation, not a utility vault. A buried structure with only the front exposed, maybe 20 feet wide, maybe more under the soil. The entry is blocked by a steel door painted the same dull brown as the earth around it. 2 vent pipes come out of the bank farther uphill, disguised inside fake stump sleeves that have weathered into the trees. 10 yards to the right, there is a rock pile with a drainage gap at the bottom. Not natural, deliberate spillway. Somebody put this thing here and knew how to keep it dry. I walk the perimeter first. Always the perimeter. There is another habit the mountains teach you. Do not rush the only doorway until you understand every place a person can watch it from. I circle wide, step over rotten timbers, find the uphill vents, check the drainage, then come back down to the door. A faded brass plate sits near shoulder height, almost invisible under dirt. I rub it with my glove. N. Rourke. No rank, no dates, no warning. Just a name. The handle is locked, but the lock body is old and the frame around it shows scuffs from use, not from vandalism. I put my ear to the steel, nothing. No hum, no fan, no shuffle inside. I knock once with 2 knuckles and wait. Nothing again, I should leave. I know that right away. This is private ground, even if nobody listed it on anything I have. My contract is road inspection, not entering buried structures built by whoever N. Rourke was. But the door is standing open a 1/4 inch at the bottom, where the lower seal has shrunk, and cool, dry air is coming through. Not cave air, filtered air. I crouch and shine my light through the gap. Concrete floor, a rubber mat. Dust, but not much. That means 2 things. The place was sealed well, and somebody maintained it longer than the road outside would suggest. The latch takes a minute. The strike plate is misaligned from frost heave or settling. I put my shoulder into it, and the door moves inward with a slow metal scrape that makes me stop twice and listen after each inch. The beam of my light catches a narrow entry hall painted flat gray. Another steel door stands inside, this one with a wheel handle and a small square window set at eye level. Stenciled letters on the wall read, "Decontamination." Under that, "Boots off if possible." That line is written by hand with black paint, added later, less official than the stencil. I shut the outer door behind me without letting it latch. I do not know why I do that. Habit, maybe. Maybe I do not want to trap myself in somebody else's idea of safety. The inner door is unlocked. The wheel turns with resistance, then frees up. When it swings in, my light falls into a room that takes a second to register because it is too complete. Bunks along one wall, shelving. A steel table bolted to the floor. A wood stove vented into a baffled pipe stack. Battery bank cabinets. A generator room behind a half-open door. Pegboards with tools hung in outlines. Water drums. Medical cabinet. Dry goods in rodent-proof bins. Old, yes, but not ruined. Clean enough that I can tell where the dust sits and where it does not. Somebody was here within the last few years, maybe not living here full-time, but checking it. I do not step farther in until I have turned in a slow circle and looked at every corner. There is a discipline to rooms built by military men. You can read it. Wait where it belongs. Clean lines of movement. No decoration except what serves a rule. On the wall opposite the bunks hangs a framed sheet of typed paper under cracked glass. Shelter rules. There are 12 of them. I read them standing up, one hand still on the door. 1. Water is measured daily, never assumed. 2. Sanitation failures kill more people than hunger. 3. No outside fire, noise, or visible light after dusk. 4. Nobody enters the main room before quarantine. 5. No full inventory is discussed with newcomers. 6. Nobody sleeps armed in common space. 7. Comfort is scheduled. Maintenance is constant. 8. 2 exits remain 2 exits only if one stays quiet. 9. Fear is not authority. 10. Written tasks beat spoken promises. 11. A refuge becomes a target the day it appears easy. 12. If a person refuses the rules, send that person away before dark. I read them twice. The place gets quieter the longer I stand there. There is no generator running, no fan, just the insulated stillness of concrete under earth. I move through the main room, then the generator bay. The diesel tank is 3/4 full. Old fuel treatment bottles sit lined on a shelf with dates written in marker. Someone rotated stock here on a schedule. There is a hand pump tied into a buried cistern. 2 lanterns hang near the bunks. One is modern. Not 1980s modern, Recent. I pick it up and the battery indicator blinks green. Somebody left this place ready. The name keeps bothering me, so I start looking for it. I find it in a binder on the steel table. Major General Nathan Rourke, retired. The binder is not hidden. It is labeled Site Maintenance/Read First. Inside are laminated checklists, fuel treatment dates, valve maps, battery cycling notes, septic instructions, inspection routines, and pages of cramped handwriting added in the margins over decades. The handwriting gets shakier near the end. Under the binder is a county tax parcel map from years ago with the shelter parcel carved out under a trust. Under that is a folder of contractor invoices with different company names, but the same hand signing the checks. Rourke built the place in parts, through shell companies and cash jobs. No single contractor saw the whole structure. He did not trust one person with the full plan. I should stop there. I do not. Curiosity will get a person into stupid situations faster than bad weather. I know that and keep reading anyway. The later notes are not about concrete or fuel. They are about people. Short, direct, often mean in a way that comes from somebody who spent a lifetime making decisions nobody thanked him for. Never let one person hold food and ammunition access. Never tell a frightened group every option at once. Give work before explanations. Isolate illness early, isolate rumor earlier. When newcomers arrive, show them the rules before the bunks. If you cannot secure pity, pity will secure your failure. That one makes me stand there a second longer. There is a photograph clipped inside the back cover. Rourke in old age, thinner than I expect, standing outside this same door in a wool cap and work coat. Snow around his boots. No smile. Behind him, partly cut off, is a woman in a lawn chair under a blanket. I flip the photo over. Alice, September. Last snow line came early. No other note. I do not know who Alice is. Wife? Sister? Friend? All I know is he wrote her name softer than the rest. I spend another 40 minutes going through the place, mostly because I cannot quite believe it is real. The pantry has freeze-dried food, dry beans, rice, salt, canned meat, water purification tablets, old but sealed medical supplies, field manuals, hand tools, spare gaskets, spark plugs, lamp mantles, blankets vacuum-packed in plastic tubs, even spare eyeglasses sorted by strength in little drawers. One room off the back is a radio alcove with a shortwave set, antenna tuner, and a stack of frequencies updated by hand through 3 different decades. Another holds 6 narrow sleeping cells instead of another common bunk room. That stands out. Most prepper shelters I have seen in magazines or county training packets treat sleep as one big shared space. This one splits it up on purpose. Privacy for discipline, distance for arguments. Rourke was planning for more than weather. When I finally step back outside, the daylight looks too wide after the concrete. I lock the outer door the way I found it, brush out my boot prints near the threshold, then walk the access road back down slower than I came up. At the truck, I sit behind the wheel without starting it and look at the GPS track on my tablet. The spur road is not on the parcel layers. The shelter itself is not on the county structure overlay. Somebody buried money and intent in a hillside and kept it out of view for decades. Part of me wants to put it straight into the report, wash my hands of it, and let lawyers fight over it. Another part knows exactly what happens when I do that. The timber company flags it. County notices, news travels, scrap crews, curiosity seekers, and 2-bit thieves start taking interest. If the place is abandoned, it gets picked clean. If it is not abandoned, I bring strangers onto somebody else's ground. I mark the spur road as unauthorized private improvement and leave the structure off the formal report. Just enough truth to cover the route, not enough to hand over the door. That is the first dishonest choice I make. It sits in my throat the whole drive down. At the motel that night, I use bad Wi-Fi to search the name from the plate. Nathan Rourke is real. West Point, Vietnam. Logistics command later. Retired to this county almost 20 years ago. Local articles call him difficult, private, generous with scholarships, impossible in public meetings. He fought zoning boards, power utility plans, and 2 separate county tax assessments. There is an obituary from 22 months earlier. Died at home, age 78. Survived by no children. Wife Alice died 6 years before him. Service private by request. Donations to volunteer fire district only. I sit on the motel bed, reading that little obituary on my phone, and look back toward the mountain through the cheap curtains as though the shelter might somehow hear me. For the next 3 weeks, I finish the road contract, invoice the company, and try not to think about the buried concrete room above the timberline. That does not work. It gets into my routines. I start buying extra batteries at the hardware store because I remember the radio alcove and the lantern with a green charge light. I pick up diesel treatment for my truck, and then wonder whether the bottle brand matches the one on Rourke's shelf. I find myself checking the weather higher than I need to. Nothing in my life changes on the surface. Same rented room behind the tire shop, same coffee in the morning, same county roads and muddy boots. But the knowledge of that place sits there, steady and practical. A hidden answer to a question nobody has asked yet. The first sign something is wrong does not come from the news. It comes from the urgent care parking lot on a Thursday afternoon. I am downtown dropping off signed maps for a survey client when I pass the clinic and see 2 sheriff units blocking the entrance. A nurse in a yellow gown is standing outside with no mask on, holding the door shut from the handle side with both hands, while a deputy talks into his shoulder mic. A man sits on the curb nearby with blood on his jeans and no one touching him. Traffic keeps moving. People slow down to look, then keep going. That is the whole country in one image. We notice. We do not know what it means. We keep going. By evening, every gas station in town has a line. The local radio says there has been a violent incident at the regional hospital and asks people to stay home unless they need emergency care. Nobody says outbreak. Nobody says infected. They say neurological event, contaminated patients, law enforcement response, temporary precautions. I am in the grocery store when a woman drops 2 cases of bottled water, trying to stack them into her cart, and nobody offers to help because everyone around her is doing the same calculation at the same time. Water, batteries, fuel, shelf food, dog food, baby wipes. Nobody learned anything from the last panic except how to move faster. I do not go full idiot and fill a truck with junk. I buy what I would buy before a winter storm. Canned food, rice, coffee, propane, trash bags, bleach, bandages, gloves, extra socks, dog food, even though I do not own a dog because somebody always needs dog food later. Then I add one thing I would not have bought a month earlier: a case of diesel treatment. The cashier, a kid from the feed store, glances at it and says, "You expecting trouble?" I tell him I work remote roads and winter is not over in the high country. He nods and rings me up without another question. The next morning, power flickers twice before dawn. My phone fills with alert messages from 3 counties over, avoid contact with symptomatic persons, report violent disturbances, emergency departments overwhelmed, schools closed, do not travel unless necessary. I call my sister in Spokane. No answer, I call again, straight to voicemail. I text her to stay inside, lock the doors, and not open for anybody she does not know. I hate the text the second I send it. It sounds dramatic and stupid. 2 hours later, she replies with one line, saw it on the freeway camera feed, staying home with Mark, phone battery low. I do not get another message that day. Town comes apart by degrees, not in one clean movie moment. First, the fuel pumps stop taking cards because the network drops. Then the hardware store closes early after a man bites another man in line near the plumbing aisle. Then the volunteer fire siren goes off and stays on for too long. Then the county posts a boil advisory even though water pressure still seems normal. By noon, there are people driving around in circles looking for open stores and people standing in parking lots, listening to phones held out in front of them because nobody trusts what any official voice says anymore. I go back to my room, lock the door, and start laying things on the bed in stacks. Food, water, tools, warm layers, medical, ammunition, maps. If I stay here, I am one more person in a town that is about to turn into a rumor mill with broken plumbing. If I leave now, I may still beat the roadblocks. I am loading the truck when Nora Bell comes around the corner behind the tire shop with dried blood on one sleeve and a backpack hanging open. I know her from high school, though not well. She works part-time on the ambulance crew and part-time at the farm supply office. She is practical, not loud, and the kind of person who puts a hand on a problem before she starts talking about it. She stops when she sees the truck bed. "You're leaving," she says. I look at her sleeve first. "That yours?" She glances down at it, wipes at it once, then stops bothering. "No. Clinic transport. He bit his brother in the truck before we got there. Sheriff took both. They're telling us to stage and wait for law enforcement now." Half the deputies are not answering. "You're leaving." I tell her I have a place in the mountains. Not a cabin, not really. More of a hidden shelter. I do not give the whole story. She does not ask for the whole story. That is one reason I say yes when she asks whether one more person can fit. We do not leave right away because nothing stays simple for more than 10 minutes. Gabe Sutter shows up while Nora is packing medical supplies from her Subaru into my truck. Gabe runs heavy equipment for the county in summer, fixes whatever breaks in winter, and knows every back road within 60 miles. He has a flatbed loaded with fuel cans, chains, 2 tool chests, a welder he probably should have left behind, and enough bad attitude to power a small town. He takes one look at my truck, one look at Nora, and says, "You two are not going up there without a second vehicle." He is not asking. I tell him the route is rough and secret. He says every route in this county is rough and somebody's secret. Fair point. Then Tessa Moreno arrives with her son Luke and a motel laundry bag full of clothes. I know Tessa because she manages the old roadside lodge off Highway 12. I helped her mark a drainage easement last fall. She is holding it together by direct force and scheduling. Luke carries 2 cases of water without being told and does not speak until I ask his name. There is dried mud on both of them and glass dust on one sleeve of her jacket. A guest at the lodge turned violent in the parking lot, she says. A truck hit the office awning during the panic. She tried to wait it out. Then a second man started banging on locked doors asking for his wife and did not stop when nobody answered. She left through the back laundry exit and drove until her car lost a tire near the tire shop. She saw Gabe. Gabe saw my truck. That is how groups form at the end of ordinary life. Not from trust, from timing. I do the math in my head. 5 people, including Luke. 1 truck, 1 flatbed. 2 of us know medical basics. 1 knows engines and chains. 1 knows road conditions. 1 knows where the shelter is. It is more than I planned, and fewer than a crowd. That matters. Rourke's rule about size comes back to me. Never promise what the shelter cannot control. I do not know exact food totals, water recharge rate, or whether every system still works. But I know the mountains are better odds than this town by dark. We move fast after that. No speeches, no long debate. Gabe siphons fuel from a dead landscaping truck behind the shop while I swap my worn highway tires for the all-terrains I keep in storage. Nora tears old sheets into bandage rolls because the clinic supply bins are already contaminated by whoever touched them last. Tessa writes 1 note and tapes it inside the motel laundry bag for anyone who comes looking later. Luke carries, sorts, and watches the street with the kind of quiet that should not exist in a kid his age. When the first gunshots crack somewhere downtown, nobody flinches toward the sound. We all move faster instead. The road out of town is already failing. A pickup sits sideways across the intersection near the bank with both front doors open and nobody around it. Half a dozen people are running in different directions 3 blocks over. A woman in hospital scrubs is kneeling beside a man on the sidewalk and shaking his shoulder. He is not moving. Nobody stops. Nora turns her face away and keeps scanning ahead. At the grocery light, a sheriff unit has rolled into the median and idles with the driver door open. There is blood on the windshield. I do not slow enough to study it. Whatever answer sits in that seat, I do not need it. We do not take the highway. Gabe leads us through a county gravel route behind the fairgrounds and up past the quarry. Twice we detour around stalled cars. Once we pass a school bus with 3 children still inside, faces in the windows, 1 adult trying to drag a road barricade into place by herself. I almost stop. I really do. My foot comes off the gas and hovers. Then I look at the distance between us. The narrowing road, the cars already blocking half the shoulder, and the line of people coming from the neighborhood behind the bus in a loose, wrong-moving cluster. Nora sees my hands on the wheel and says, very flat, "If we stop here, we stop for 20 more." She is right. That does not help. We keep going. By the time we hit the forest road, smoke is rising from 2 places back down the valley. Cellular service dies 1 bar at a time until the phones become maps and clocks. Gabe radios back from the flatbed through the cheap handsets he keeps for road crews. Washout ahead. Stay left. Bridge deck intact. Fresh slide on the inside shoulder. He sounds steadier once he has machinery and terrain to fight instead of human panic. Luke sits between Tessa and Nora in the back seat with a paper map spread over his knees, following my finger when I point to each turn. I tell him not to mark the final spur on anything. He nods once, folds that section under, and keeps the rest open. Smart kid. We hit the first real problem 9 miles from the shelter. A delivery van has slid off a switchback and lodged against a stand of young fir, blocking most of the road. The driver's side door hangs open, no driver in sight. Below the guard line, the slope drops into boulders and brush. I stop 50 yards short and get out with Gabe, while Nora keeps the truck running. The van can be winched if the frame holds, but it will take time. While Gabe rigs the cable, I walk ahead around the nose and find drag marks in the mud leading into the trees. Then I find the driver, or what used to be him, wedged between two rocks with one leg broken under him, head lifting in little jerks every time I shift my boot on gravel. I do not call anybody over. I raise the pistol with both hands, put one round where it needs to go, and stand there a second, listening to the echo roll off the slope. The silence after that is worse than the shot. Up in the truck, Luke ducks below the window without being told. Nora gets out anyway, comes down halfway, stops when she sees my face, then turns and goes back to the truck. Nobody says anything while Gabe winches the van just far enough to scrape by. The shot carries farther than I want. 10 minutes later, movement appears down the trail behind us. 2 figures first, then 3 more, all coming unevenly through the trees toward the road noise. Fresh ones. Not slow. Not dead long. One still wears a hiking day pack. Another has one shoe. They are not coordinated, but they move fast enough to force choice. Gabe shouts and jumps back into the flatbed. I slam my truck into low gear and nose past the van with one mirror brushing bark, while Nora braces one arm over Luke and Tessa twists to watch the rear. The first figure hits the side of Gabe's flatbed hard enough to leave a bloody handprint on the steel side rail, then tumbles under the back corner. Gabe does not break. By the time we clear the bend, the rest are behind brush and sound. That is when the mountains finally work in our favor. Fewer roads, less noise, fewer people to feed a wave. The higher we climb, the more the world narrows back down to grades, rock, weather, fuel, and whether I remembered the right fork beyond the dead bridge approach. At the creek crossing, I take the old timber spur instead of the main line, because the main line has a cattle gate somebody chained recently from the inside. Recent human decisions on a mountain road mean complication. I do not need more of it. The truck bucks through 2 washouts and 1 snow patch in shadow. Then the ground levels, and I see the alder screen where the hidden spur branches off. Relief does not come in any clean way. I just stop talking, turn hard uphill, and feel everybody in the cab go quiet with me. The shelter shelf is exactly where I left it, and completely different now that I need it. There is no romance in that moment, no movie miracle, just dirt, concrete, steel, and the weight of 5 people staring at one brown-painted door that may or may not still open. I am out before the truck stops fully rolling. Gabe swings down from the flatbed with a pry bar in one hand. Nora pulls on gloves. Tessa gets Luke behind the engine block and scans the tree line with the shotgun Gabe shoved at her 2 bends earlier. Good. Everybody is operating. Nobody is asking me whether this is really it. The lock sticks worse than last time. Dirt in the track, cold metal, old alignment. Gabe braces the frame while I work the keyring of general-purpose picks I carry for survey gates and utility boxes. On the 3rd try, the latch bites, and the heavy door shifts inward the same 1/4 inch I found before. The same cool, dry air comes through. Real, still sealed, still alive in the only way a place can be alive. We get inside in less than 30 seconds, and I pull the outer door shut behind Gabe with both hands and a shoulder. The sound of it latching cuts off the mountain in one blunt move. The main room smells of dust, old steel, and sealed food. No rot, no animal intrusion, no human occupancy since I left. I tell everybody to stop where they are and listen. No generator, no hidden voice, no scuff, nothing. Then I walk them through the decontamination room one by one. Boots off if possible, outer clothing hung by hooks, hands scrubbed with stored soap and heated kettle water from the camping stove Gabe brought. Nobody argues. Nora does the medical check right there under a battery lantern, Sleeves up, collars down, backs, legs, scalp, everywhere. Honest inspection, no pride. I go last. When she is done, she nods once and writes all 5 names, time of entry, and no visible bites or blood exposure beyond known contact on a page torn from a maintenance log. Rourke would approve. We do not turn on the generator yet. That is the first hard decision, and the right one. Noise outside matters. Exhaust matters. Habit matters. Instead, we use 2 lanterns, 1 headlamp, and the last light coming through the open inner door, while Gabe and I check every valve and breaker against the binder. Waterline first. Cistern valve opens after some persuasion and one ugly sound that makes me think I just broke it. But then the hand pump primes and cold, clean water comes up into the sink. Nora laughs once, short and sharp. Not because anything is funny, but because water changes the whole equation. Next, we check the battery bank. Half charge on the main set. Solar trickle input dead from one roof panel string, maybe buried under debris or disconnected. Good enough for lights and radio if we ration it. The generator will wait until dark. Tessa takes the bunks in first, then the food shelves, then the sleeping cells. Her eyes land on the shelf labels and the handwritten stock dates, and I can see her counting days already. Luke stands in the radio alcove touching nothing, just reading the frequency sheets and the little pencil notes Rourke made in the margins. Gabe opens the stove baffle, studies the vent path, and says, "He built this to hide heat signature." He is right. Double wall, long internal run, stone mass around the exit. No bright chimney, no easy smoke. Rourke did not build a panic room. He built a field position for a siege. We eat cold food the first night because routine matters more than comfort. Tuna, crackers, canned peaches, water measured out by bottle marks. Nora sets up a medical corner using Rourke's cabinet and her own pack. Tessa wipes every reachable surface with diluted bleach because order gives her something to control. Gabe checks the outer door hinges, then the inner wheel seal, then the secondary drain, then the vent stumps uphill with me covering him from the tree line. Luke copies the shelter rules onto a fresh pad, so we do not have to keep reading the faded framed sheet on the wall. When he gets to Rule 9, fear is not authority. He looks up at me and says, "Did he write these from experience?" I tell him yes. That is the safest answer, and probably the correct one. Dark comes early under the trees. With the outer world shut out, the shelter changes character once the lanterns are the only light. Smaller, more deliberate. Every sound becomes identifiable. A spoon set down, a boot sole on concrete, the click of a valve handle, the scratch of Tessa's pen while she inventories the food we brought in. No one has much appetite. That is not from lack of hunger. It is from the simple fact that this is the first still place any of us has stood in since morning, and stillness makes room for thought. Thought is dangerous if it starts running faster than tasks. So I open the maintenance binder and begin assigning work off Rourke's own pages. Morning water count, waste procedure, vent inspection, noise discipline, sleeping rotation. No firearms in common room unless there is a reason. One long gun at the inner door, one sidearm on the watchstand. Outer entry never opened by one person alone. Everybody writes what he or she uses from medical and pantry stores. Gabe actually smiles when he hears that last one. Finally, he says, "A dead guy with standards." We sleep in separate cells that first night, one person to a room except Luke, who takes the cell beside his mother with the partition door pinned open. I take first watch in the main room with the lantern turned low and the shotgun across the table within reach. The radio hisses when I try local emergency frequencies. One county repeater is dead. Another carries fragments. Road closure at mile marker. Do not approach. Unit down. Need medical at... Then static. Near midnight, a state emergency frequency comes alive with a recorded message telling citizens to shelter in place, avoid all direct contact, and boil drinking water. By then we are under a mountain, and the message might as well be speaking to ghosts. I do not sleep more than 2 hours before a sound wakes me. A metallic tap, very faint, from the entry hall. I am out of the chair and at the inner door before I fully know I am moving. Nothing through the square window except darkness. Another tap. Then I realize what it is. The outer door, cooling in night air, settling against the frame. Not a hand. Not a person. Just steel shifting? I stand there long enough to feel stupid, then not stupid at all. Rourke was right. Fear is not authority. It makes bad calls sound reasonable. By the second day, the shelter starts showing its age. One latrine vent line is partially blocked and pushes smell back into the service corridor. Gabe and I spend an hour on the roof slope clearing roots from the vent cap without exposing more soil than we have to. The battery bank drops faster than expected under radio use, so Luke and I trace the dead solar line to a junction box hidden under a rock cover 30 yards upslope. One cable has been chewed by a porcupine or damaged by weather. We splice in spare wire from Rourke's stores and gain back enough charge to keep the lights and radio steady. Nora rotates medical stock and finds half the antibiotics expired, half still usable, and all of them worth keeping because expiration dates matter less than having nothing. Tessa starts a written ration board with dates and count marks. Nobody resents it. Structure feels better than guessing. During a break, while Nora boils instruments and Tessa folds blankets into a cleaner stack, I go deeper into Rourke's papers. There are more binders in a locked drawer under the steel table. The key hangs behind the frame of the rule sheet. Of course it does. The old man wanted discipline, not treasure hunting. Inside the drawer are journals by year, written in small block print. Not emotional diary stuff. Field notes, weather, supply rotation, county politics, contractor failures, local rumors, national blackout concerns, fuel storage tips. Then, scattered between the practical entries, sharp lessons from his own life. Refugees during war logistics, panic in evacuation centers, good men who started hoarding under pressure, friendly people who stopped following rules once a child got sick. He writes about hunger, cold, and illness, but he keeps circling back to one thing. Collapse turns every shelter into an argument over control. If the argument starts before the rules, the shelter is already lost. That line keeps me busy for a long time. It also explains the architecture, the private sleeping cells, the quarantine vestibule, the locked armory with a viewing slot, the pantry shelves visible from the common room holding only part of the food count, the second corridor door hidden behind a shelving wall in the service area. I find that one while tracing plumbing. It opens into a narrow tunnel with unfinished concrete, low ceiling, and a ladder that rises to a concealed hatch uphill under a rotten log and rock cover. Secondary exit. Quiet one. Rule 8. 2 exits remain 2 exits only if one stays quiet. Rourke did not just write that rule. He poured it in concrete. That evening we hear a truck on the lower road. Just once, engine laboring, then stalling. All 5 of us freeze without anybody telling us to. Sound travels weird in timber. Could be a mile away. Could be close. We kill the lanterns, sit in the dark, and listen. A door slam. A voice carried thin by distance. Another voice. Then nothing. Gabe wants to step outside and look. I say no. Nora says if those people are sick and coming uphill, darkness helps them more than us. Tessa says nothing, but she already has Luke by the shoulder and his flashlight off. We stay put. 2 hours later, we hear 3 shots spaced far apart. Nobody sleeps easy after that. Morning settles the question. Fresh tire marks on the lower road. No turn into our spur. 1 set of boot prints near the creek, where somebody walked off the shoulder and back. We got lucky. Or maybe the road clutter and brush hit our turn. Either way, the shelter stops feeling invisible and starts feeling merely hidden. Big difference. Hidden things get found when pressure builds. On the 4th day, the first real test arrives. I am on vent watch uphill when I see movement through the trees below. One woman, alone, weaving more from exhaustion than infection, one hand on a branch, backpack dragging from one shoulder. I drop low and watch her for a full minute. No erratic sprint, no fixed stare, no blood I can see. She reaches the shelf near the shelter face and stops when she sees the concrete. Then she turns in a slow circle, taking it in. She is not surprised to find people. She is relieved to find walls. That is dangerous in its own way. Relief makes people push. I call down from cover and tell her to stand where she is and keep her hands visible. She does. Good sign, her name is Sadie. She was with 2 cousins at a hunting cabin 3 ridges south. One got fever and turned violent after a bite near the river. The other ran at night. She walked since dawn, water bottle empty, left boot sole peeling off. She asks whether there are children inside. I do not answer. Rourke says no full inventory with newcomers. Also, never confirm what you do not need to confirm. We use the quarantine room exactly how Rourke designed it. Outer door open. Sadie strips outer layers, washes hands and face, steps into the decontamination hall under Nora's instructions, and submits to inspection without argument. Clean, exhausted, mild dehydration, no visible wound. We still keep her in the decon room for 12 hours with water, blankets, and a bucket toilet. That sounds harsh until you imagine the alternative. She understands quicker than I expect. You're doing it right, she says through the inner window. Most places aren't. That sentence bothers me more than pleading would have. Sadie turns out useful fast. She worked trail crews summers and a bakery in town winters. She can carry, cut, clean, and take direction without taking it personal. Luke starts talking again after she arrives, which tells me how tightly he was wound. Tessa watches Sadie the whole first day, then relaxes when Sadie helps scrub the decon room without being asked. Gabe stays suspicious because Gabe stays suspicious about everyone. Nora says that is a healthy baseline now. Again, not comforting, but correct. We settle into a rhythm that almost pretends to be life. Morning water count. Exterior watch by pairs. Wood processing inside the baffle room only. Fuel use logged by hour. Radio check at set times. Meals simple, hot when safe. Sadie and Tessa start a laundry rotation with hand wash basins that keeps everybody cleaner than I would have guessed. Gabe rebuilds the generator muffler from spare parts and a length of stovepipe wrap to cut the signature even more. Nora teaches Luke how to check temperatures, clean cuts, and record symptoms. I spend hours in Rourke's journals, then hours outside matching his notes to the slope and tree line. The shelter stops being a miracle and becomes a machine. That is when it starts feeling survivable. Then the journals get personal in a way that changes the whole place. Alice, the woman in the photograph, was Rourke's wife. She had a degenerative illness, likely dementia, though he never writes the word directly. He built the shelter in stages after a long regional blackout, and a winter storm left county services thin for 6 days. His stated reasons are power grid fragility, urban dependence, fuel risk. But the deeper reason shows through later. He did not trust institutions to keep a vulnerable person safe when systems got stressed. He writes about hospital backup failures, evacuation shelter thefts, medication delays, and one entry that sits in my head for hours after I read it. I can protect my wife from snow with a roof. I can protect her from hunger with stores. I can protect her from disease with discipline. What I cannot protect her from is a frightened crowd that decides rules are cruelty. So I will build where I can say no and make it stick. That is the something more complicated the shelter was built against. Not disaster itself. Human bargaining under disaster. The way decent people start cutting corners around the sick, the weak, the old, the ones who slow the plan. Rourke had seen that pattern too many times to romanticize survival. He designed the shelter to keep mercy from turning sloppy and fear from turning into whoever grabbed the gun first. On the 7th day, we make our first supply run because we have to, not because it is smart. The shelter has food, yes, but not enough fuel if we want long-term power blocks. And the nearest stream route Rourke mapped for backup water is under a steep rock face that still has late snow. We need chainsaw oil, antibiotics if we can find them, seed packets, and one specific battery type the radio tuner uses. I hate leaving the shelter. I hate staying blind more. Gabe comes with me because no engine problem stays small around him. Sadie wants in because she knows the hunting cabins south. Nora stays with Tessa and Luke because medical and common sense say the shelter should not empty itself. We take the flatbed stripped down, quiet if possible, and roll out before dawn using the lower timber road instead of the main county line. The world beyond the spur has aged 10 years in 1 week. Burned pickup at the creek. Abandoned camp trailer torn open. More silence than normal, which is never a gift. It means people have either fled, died, or learned to stop making noise. At the second hunting cabin, we find no survivors. Just canned food missing from the pantry, blankets gone, and blood on the porch rail. No bodies. Better than bodies. Worse for certainty. We take chain oil, winter socks, and a box of 12-gauge shells from a cabinet whose owner no longer needs clean bookkeeping. The pharmacy in the tiny crossroads town farther down is already broken open when we get there. Not ransacked clean, picked over in haste. Gabe stays at the truck with the engine ready. Sadie covers the back alley. I go in through a splintered side door and pick through shelves under the smell of antiseptic and spoiled milk from a dead cooler. Antibiotics are mostly gone. Painkillers, too. I find dressings, saline, insulin in an unplugged fridge that is already warming, and 2 sealed boxes of the tuner batteries by the register because no looter cares about radio parts. Good enough. On the way out, I hear a sound from the exam room hall and stop hard. A child crying would have been easier. This is just a soft shoe drag on linoleum. The man that comes through the half-open exam door is not fully gone yet. He wears a janitor shirt, has a bite taken from his forearm through the sleeve, and keeps saying, "Help me," between long, vacant gaps. The worst part is that he means it in 1 second and does not know me in the next. Sadie sees him through the front glass and shakes her head once before I do anything stupid. We back out. He follows until the daylight hits his face, then stumbles into a display rack. I shut the door. He starts hitting it with both palms a second later. One panel cracks. We are already moving by then. We do not make it back clean. Halfway up the timber road, a lifted pickup swings out from behind a stack of old logging slash and blocks the track. 3 men, 1 rifle, 1 revolver, 1 tire iron. Not a formal ambush. Hungry, armed panic with enough gas to reach one. The rifleman is in a rain jacket with prison tattoos on his neck and a county water department hat. He tells us to step out, leave the vehicle, and maybe keep walking. Gabe leans on the wheel and says, "No." Real conversational. Bad sign. Sadie drops low in the passenger seat without waiting for permission. I already have the shotgun across my lap under the dash. Everything after that runs on small bad choices colliding. The man with the tire iron circles too close to Gabe's side. The rifleman glances toward Sadie when he should have kept the barrel steady. I open my door into the revolver man's knees hard enough to dump him, and Gabe drives the flatbed straight into the pickup nose. Metal folds. Rifle shot cracks the windshield. Sadie fires once through the open passenger window, and the man with the tire iron spins off his feet into the ditch. Gabe jams the truck into reverse, then first again, shoving the lighter pickup sideways enough to open half a lane. I drag the revolver man clear before the front tire takes his arm off, and by the time I get back in, the rifleman is running uphill through brush with no interest in dying for canned goods. We put 6 miles behind us before Gabe says anything. Then he says, "That will bring them if he lives." He is talking about the rifleman. He is right again. We return to the shelter through the secondary approach Rourke marked for snow escape, brush the tire tracks as much as we can, and unload in total silence except for the scrape of crates on concrete. Nora sees the cracked windshield, the blood on Sadie's sleeve that is not hers, and the way Gabe keeps checking the outer door even while carrying sacks, and she does not ask for the whole story right then. She just starts the inspection routine. Good. Procedure first, story later. That night, we changed the rules from theory to defense. No open flame at all after dark, unless the stove baffle is sealed. Outer shelf watch in pairs only. Secondary exit checked and kept clear. Ammo distributed but logged. Newcomers refused after dusk, no exceptions. Gabe rigs a silent pull line from the outer door latch to a bell in the service corridor. Luke copies the revised watch rotation in block letters and pins it beside Rourke's rules. Tessa packs 1 emergency bag for each person and lines them under the hidden tunnel shelf without telling anyone she did it. I only notice because she labels Luke's in marker and then crosses the name out to make it less obvious from a distance. Good instinct. The rifleman does survive. We know that 2 days later, when we find boot prints near the lower creek and cigarette butts in the mud behind a stump that overlooks the road. Not hikers, not random. Watching. Gabe wants to move immediately. Abandon the shelter before it gets tested. Part of me agrees. The other part keeps seeing the road down valley, the broken town, the scarcity already biting, and the simple fact that moving 6 people through known timber with 1 child and limited fuel is another form of volunteering for failure. Rourke did not build this place to flee the first serious threat. He built it to deny momentum to other people's panic. So we prepare instead. We cover the shelter face with cut brush woven through old wire loops Rourke embedded in the concrete for that exact purpose. We move a portion of the visible pantry stores into the hidden service room. We pre-stage water buckets in case of fire. Gabe and I sight angles from the uphill hatch, the tree line, and the creek approach until we know exactly where a person disappears from view. Sadie lays strips of thin tin and broken glass in the leaf litter on the quiet approach, not to injure, just to make noise. Nora puts medical triage and decon so nobody has to invent it under pressure. Tessa teaches Luke how to stay out of the firing line without freezing. Not once does she tell him everything will be okay. I respect her more for that. On the 10th night, the first desperate knock comes. 3 fast hits on the outer door, then a voice. Male. Hoarse. Please. Just water. We are all awake before the second knock because nobody really sleeps deep anymore. I move to the inner window. No lantern on our side. No answer yet. The man outside says his friend is hurt. Says they saw the vent pipes. Says they know someone is in here. There it is. No more hidden. Only fortified. Gabe is already shaking his head in the dark. Nora whispers, "Do not open unless you can control the whole scene." Rourke again. I tell the man through steel that water will be left outside at first light down by the lower road. Nothing more. He starts cursing within 2 seconds. Not begging, not grief, anger. Better information than a confession. He says we are hiding enough to help. He says he knows how many tire tracks he saw last week. He says we are not the only ones armed. Then something thuds against the outer door. Maybe a boot, maybe a shoulder. Gabe brings the shotgun up. I motion him down. Not yet. If they want the door, they need tools. If they have tools, we will hear them. After 10 minutes of shouting, the voices retreat down slope. We stay awake until dawn anyway. At first light, I go out through the secondary hatch with Sadie covering from the brush. 2 men down by the creek, one standing, one sitting against a log with a bandaged leg. Rifleman from the roadblock and the revolver man I thought I dragged clear. The standing one sees the water jug I leave on a rock 30 yards away and does not thank me. He just watches the slope too carefully. Counting. Measuring. I understand then that mercy has already become reconnaissance in his head. Rourke had a whole line about that in one of the journals. Kindness without boundaries becomes intelligence gathering for the desperate. I hate how correct dead men can be. The attack comes that afternoon, not at night. That surprises me until I remember panic favors daylight, because men believe more in their chances when they can see them. There are 4 of them this time, maybe 5. 1 circles uphill. 1 stays by the lower road. 2 come straight for the shelf, carrying a pry bar, an axe, and a blue fuel can. Fire. Of course. Gabe sees the can through the outer slit and swears once. Very quiet. We have already staged for this. Lanterns out. Wet blankets ready. Water buckets lined by the entry. Sadie and I slip through the secondary hatch before the first strike lands on the outer door. From uphill, the geometry changes everything. The shelf that feels exposed from inside becomes a controlled bowl from the trees above. I have the rifle now. Sadie has Gabe's spare shotgun. We do not shoot first because we still do not know whether one of them is bluffing or whether the whole thing breaks if one man decides the price is too high. Then the axe bites the door frame, and the man with the can starts sloshing fuel along the concrete seam. That makes the decision. My first shot takes the can out of his hand and bursts fuel across the dirt instead of the door. Sadie's blast strips bark over the axeman's head and drives him flat behind a stump. Below, Gabe fires 1 warning round through the outer slot toward the lower road, and the lookout vanishes. What should have ended there gets worse, because one of the attackers is already infected, and either hiding it or past caring. I see him only when he breaks from the brush on the uphill side and charges crooked toward the secondary hatch route, with one sleeve tied tight above a dark, swollen forearm. Fresh enough to run. Sick enough not to care about survival. That is a kind of weapon on its own. He is not thinking about retreat, cover, or tomorrow. He is thinking only about getting close. I shoot him at 15 yards, and he drops, rolls, then starts dragging himself downhill again on one elbow. Nothing human in the intent anymore, but enough body left to keep moving. The rest of the fight collapses into fragments. Gabe bursts out of the outer door with a fire blanket over one arm because the spilled fuel caught from a match and flashed along the concrete lip. Nora is behind him with another bucket. Tessa drags Luke into the service corridor and bars the inner door to the main room because one rule matters now more than all others. If the outer shell fails, the core still holds. Sadie moves downslope left to cut off the man behind the stump. I cover the lower road and see the rifleman hauling his wounded friend by the jacket toward the trees, abandoning the whole idea. He is done. Good. I let him run. Another fight later is not improved by one more body now. The man I shot uphill keeps moving after I reach him. That is the part that settles the last doubts in my mind. Not confusion, not drugs, not pain. His jaw works at the air, and his hands clutch for my boot until I end it with a second round. When I turn back toward the shelter, smoke is rising from black scorch marks on the concrete face, but the structure holds. Gabe has burned one glove and half an eyebrow. Nora is cursing him while she checks his hands. Sadie comes out of the trees with a split lip and the axe from the shelf. She says the man behind the stump kept running once she flanked him. Tessa is standing in the service corridor with Luke behind her and one of Rourke's old revolvers in both hands. The sight of that hits me harder than the shots did. Nobody in this shelter is innocent of what is happening anymore. We spend the next hour cleaning, cooling, and hardening. Fire out. Fuel-soaked dirt shoveled away. Doorframe checked for structural damage. Entry hall scrubbed where blood splashed during the rush. Nora bandages Gabe's hand and Sadie's lip. Tessa makes Luke sit at the table and write down everything he saw. Not because anybody needs a child's statement, but because he needs the event put into sequence instead of letting it keep spinning in his head. That is another form of discipline. I walk the tree line until dusk, looking for anyone who stayed behind. Nothing except one dropped water bottle and a trail of blood leading away, then thinning, then gone. That night I go back into Rourke's journals and finally find the entry I did not know I was looking for. 10 years before his death, he took in 2 men during a blizzard after a highway closure, fed them, warmed them. One tried to force the pantry once he realized the site was larger than it appeared. The other went along with it because weakness drifts toward confidence under stress. Rourke wrote the 12 rules after that. Not before. After. The shelter was originally built for survival. The rules were built from betrayal. That is why every system here keeps one layer hidden behind another. Not paranoia in the abstract. Specific memory turned into design. At the back of the same journal, I find a reference to Reserve Compartment C, open only if the shelter passes its first true test. I stare at that for a while, thinking it is old man drama. Then I start checking the service wall for anything that does not match the plans. Gabe joins me halfway through because he hears me tapping concrete and wants in. 2 feet behind the visible pantry shelves, We find a false back panel held by recessed latches disguised under paint. Behind it is a narrow room no bigger than a walk-in closet. Compartment C, inside, more fuel stabilizer, more antibiotics, vacuum-packed seeds, a second tuner set, spare water filters, maps to 3 spring boxes on nearby slopes, and a sealed envelope addressed in block letters. To whoever is still using procedure when convenience would be easier. I open it at the steel table while the others watch. Lantern light low. Smoke smell still faint in the entry. The note is short. Rourke writes that every shelter attracts 2 tests. The first is whether the outside can find it. The second is whether the people inside can stay orderly once they know it has been found. If we are reading the note, he says, then we likely passed both so far. He apologizes for hiding supplies but says hidden reserve is not mistrust. It is continuity. He writes that the site contains enough for a small, disciplined group, not a county, not a congregation, not a rescue fantasy. Keep the number low. Keep sanitation high. Keep work visible. If the sick arrive, help without surrendering the threshold. If armed men arrive, make them uncertain before you make them dead. If a child is present, teach that child routines before stories. Routines survive bad news better. The last line is the only soft one. Alice did better when the same tasks happened in the same order. Maybe the rest of us do too. Nobody speaks for a while after I finish. Then Tessa takes the note, reads the line about the child, and folds it very carefully before handing it back. Luke is already staring at the seed packets in the reserve compartment. Can anything grow up here? He asks. Gabe says if it cannot, we move dirt until it can. That is the first genuinely hopeful thing anybody has said in days. Hope does not make the outside kinder. For another week, we live under the expectation of return. We find 2 more distant signs of human movement. Smoke far south one morning. Cut branches near the lower creek another afternoon. But nobody comes straight back to the door. The attack cost them enough or scattered them enough. The infected body uphill has to be moved, and that job falls to me and Sadie with masks, gloves, a tarp, and more moral fatigue than I can put into clean words. We carry him to a rockslide chute half a mile away and cover him under stone because burial in these soils would take hours we cannot spend and create disturbance we cannot hide. On the walk back, Sadie says she used to think preparedness meant having gear. Then she says now it seems to mean doing ugly work before it creates a second problem. Again, not comforting, true anyway. With the reserve compartment open, our priorities shift from immediate defense to sustained use. We locate the first spring box from Rourke's map. A concrete catch basin under ferns on the north slope, feeding a buried pipe stub he never finished connecting. Gabe and I run hose line to storage barrels inside the service corridor. It is not perfect, but it cuts our dependence on the cistern recharge schedule. Luke and Tessa clear a patch of thin soil under camouflage netting on the lower shelf for cold-tolerant greens and radishes from the reserve seeds. Nora establishes a real sick bay protocol using one of the spare sleeping cells with separate blankets, utensils, and bleach bins. Sadie and I build a concealed observation nook uphill using deadfall and 1 narrow firing slit. Work becomes the thing that keeps all of us from staring too hard at the road below. The radio eventually gives us enough fragments to understand the scale. Cities overwhelmed. National Guard mobilized in some states, absent in others. Hospitals failed fast where staff got exposed early. Water treatment interruptions. Highway closures. Rural counties holding better at first, then not. Terms change on air from civil disturbance to infection control to fatal attack incidents, and finally to emergency dead containment. Though nobody on an open channel sounds certain what that even means. We never get a clean national speech. Maybe there was one. Maybe it never reached us. In practice, it does not matter. Roads, power, medicine, trust, each thing is failing on its own timetable. Rourke predicted exactly that, just not the disease itself. 3 weeks after arrival, the weather breaks warmer and the shelter starts to feel less buried, more inhabited. Not comfortable, never that. The concrete still sweats in the wrong corners. The generator still needs coaxing on cold starts. One latrine still complains through the vent line when pressure changes. But there are towels drying by the service room. There is a cup Luke carved his initials into. Tessa has hung a schedule board over the sink in writing so sharp it could cut wood. Nora's medical shelf is cleaner than the clinic had been in the last year. Gabe sleeps better because he can hear every machine from his cell and knows when one changes tone. Sadie runs the outer shelf watch with the patience of somebody who learned the mountain mood fast. I stop thinking of the place as Rourke's shelter and start thinking of it as our position. That shift scares me more than the first knock did. Ownership creates attachment. Attachment creates risk. Then Gabe does not come in on time from dusk vent check. There it is again. Proof that no amount of structure buys certainty. Just because a group gets competent does not mean the day obeys. I wait 2 minutes past the agreed time, then 3. No pull bell, no radio whisper, no footstep on the entry mat. I do not shout his name. I take the rifle, signal Sadie, and use the secondary hatch. We find him 20 yards uphill on one knee behind the false stump vent, one hand pressed to his leg. Not bitten. Better. Worse in a different way. He stepped through old slash hidden under pine needles and drove a sharpened branch through the calf. Infection risk from dirt, blood loss, mobility problem all at once. He is angry, embarrassed, and pale in the face. Good. Anger means he is still himself. Getting him inside without contaminating half the shelter takes every rule Rourke left us. Secondary hatch to decon only. Outer layers cut away. Nora in apron and gloves. Bleach bucket ready. Luke shut in the radio alcove with a task. Not just told to hide. Tessa boiling water. Sadie scrubbing the hatch ladder after each contact point. The wound is clean enough once flushed, but deep. Nora says no tendon loss, no arterial spray, but he will not be climbing slopes for a while. That changes our defense math overnight. One less strong body outside. One more possible medical complication inside. No panic. Just harder numbers. During Gabe's recovery, Luke steps up in a way that bothers me because it means the world has already taken too much of his childhood. He learns generator start procedure from a seated Gabe. He memorizes the signal pulls for the outer bell. He runs the ration board when Tessa is in the garden patch. He even starts reading Rourke's old manuals in the bunk cell with a pencil behind one ear because he has seen adults do it enough times that it now seems normal. One evening, I catch him tracing the county map and marking every place we have heard shots or seen smoke. He is building pattern out of fear, human habit. Same thing Rourke did with binders and lines of ink. Maybe all shelters start that way. The final serious trouble does not come from the rifleman or a large raider group. It comes from a family, man, woman, little girl, walking up the lower road under a white towel tied to a branch. That image hits every defensive weakness in one frame. Tessa sees the child through the scope and says, "No one is turning them away." Gabe, stuck on a stool with a bandaged leg, says children still carry fever. Nora says quarantine either matters all the time or it does not matter. Sadie says armed men send families first sometimes. Nobody is fully wrong. That is the ugly part. The hardest calls do not come with a villain standing in the open. I go out to the lower road with Nora beside me and stop them 30 yards off. The man gives his name as Martin. Woman is Elise. Girl is Hannah, maybe 6. Dirty, tired, sunburned, but all three tracking my movements too carefully for collapse. I ask where they came from. He says Campground South Fork. I ask when they last ate. He answers too fast. I ask who tied the towel flag. He says he did. Elise's eyes flick to his hands when he says it. Small thing. Important. I ask whether anyone follows them. He says no. Then Hannah coughs behind her mask and Elise turns half away to shield it. There it is. Not a lie exactly. Just enough omission to burn a shelter down. We do not open the threshold. We do not send them off empty either. Quarantine tarp shelter down by the lower road, 50 yards from the creek, visible from our observation point, supplied with water, canned food, blankets, and a bucket latrine. Nora checks Hannah from distance and again through decon protocol adapted outdoors. Fever, yes. Bite, no. Cough, runny nose, rash from dirt and stress, maybe ordinary sickness, maybe not. Martin hates every second of being kept outside. Elise hates his reaction more than the arrangement. By the second evening, he is asking questions about our fuel, our numbers, our radio. Wrong questions. The girl's fever breaks overnight. Good. Martin's patience does not. At dawn on the third day, Martin tries to walk the slope above the tarp camp and stretch his legs. Sadie intercepts him with the rifle visible and sends him back down without raising her voice. Elise apologizes later with her face, not her mouth. Near sunset, Hannah is well enough to eat properly and play with a spoon in the dirt. That should settle the matter. Instead, Martin pushes harder, saying their family is now proved safe and should be admitted. Safe from infection, maybe, not from his need to press. I tell him the rules stand. He calls the rules cowardice. Elise closes her eyes when he says it. She already knows what comes next. Sure enough, after dark, he tries to leave the tarp shelter and approach the roadside without permission. We stop him with light, not gunfire. One lantern uncovered on the shelf. One warning through the bullhorn Rourke stored in compartment C. Go back now. He freezes because he did not know where we were watching from. That uncertainty matters, Rourke again. Make armed men uncertain before you make them dead. Martin retreats. In the morning, Elise asks for extra water, not entry. That tells me where the real leadership in that family sits. By midday, she has Hannah packed and ready to move without him. I give her Rourke's map copy to a ranger cache cabin 3 miles east and 1 fuel bottle. Martin starts to argue. She cuts him off with one sentence I do not hear, and that is the end of it. They walk out together. He looks back twice. She does not once. After they disappear into timber, Tessa stands beside me a long time and says, "If he had been the only one, you would have sent him away sooner." I tell her yes. She says, "That is why the child made it hard." I tell her yes again. Then she says something that would have made Rourke nod from his grave. Rules are not there because easy cases need them. She turns and goes inside before I answer. Time gets strange after that. Not lazy, not peaceful. Just organized in a way the old world stopped being. Watches, repair days, radio hours, gardening, trap lines for small game lower on the ridge, sanitation rotation, water transfer, seedling checks, binder updates. We become exactly what Rourke built the place for. A small group held together by a routine stronger than mood. We still have bad nights. We still hear shots far off. Once we hear a scream carried from the lower valley, and nobody moves toward it, because we cannot save a whole map. Once a young black bear tears at the garden netting, and Gabe nearly splits his stitches chasing it with a pot lid and bad language. Once Luke cries in the radio alcove after hearing a children's song on a dead station that somebody left looping by accident or design. But those moments pass into the next task. That is how survival looks when it is working. Not heroic. Scheduled. I keep reading Rourke in spare minutes. The last journal ends 6 days before his death. No grand speech, no prediction. He complains about county permit fees, notes that the north vent needs repainting, says his knee is worsening, says Alice would have hated the latest lantern battery brand, and writes one final instruction to whoever uses the shelter after him. If you are waiting for calm before you begin acting like a community, you will never begin. Calm is not the standard. Discipline is. That is the closest thing to faith he leaves behind. A month after we first sealed the door behind us, I stand on the uphill observation nook at dawn and look over the same trees I crossed during the survey job when all of this was still just odd concrete in the dirt. The lower road is empty. Mist sits over the creek. Our brush screen on the shelter face has taken hold enough that from this angle the place almost disappears again. Behind me, under the hill, I know the exact order of sounds starting the day. Nora at the kettle, Tessa checking the board, Luke folding blankets from the sickbay cell back into ordinary use, Gabe muttering at the generator starter, though he secretly enjoys the argument, Sadie cleaning the rifle at the steel table. That order matters more than any speech about hope. I think about the first dishonest choice I made, leaving the shelter off the road report. At the time it felt slippery, maybe cowardly, maybe selfish. I still do not know if it was right in any clean moral sense. But I know this. If I had put that door on paper, strangers would have stripped this place down to copper and steel before the first ambulance lost radio contact in town. Rourke would have become a weird local story and nothing more. Instead, his rules survived him. His concrete survived him. Alice's routines survived him in strange little ways through a boy writing schedules on a board under a mountain he never knew existed a month ago. That does not make the story noble. We left people behind on the road out. We sent some away from the threshold. We shot men who tried to take what we had. We used a dead general's suspicion to keep living one more day, then another, then enough days that the shelter stopped being a rumor in my own head and became morning, work, supper, watch, sleep. There is no clean version of any of that. Just the version that happened. By full light, I climb down from the nook, cover the firing slit, and head back toward the hidden hatch. On the way, I check the spring line, reset one tin noise strip near the brush, and look over the garden patch. Tiny green rows are pushing through the cold soil under netting. Real growth. Not much. Enough. When I lower myself into the tunnel and pull the hatch shut over my head, the concrete smell meets me halfway down. Inside, Luke has already updated the date board. Gabe has penciled generator hours in the margin. Nora is separating bandages by size. Tessa is rationing oats into the pot. Sadie hands me a mug without asking where I have been, because she knows exactly where I have been. I take the mug, sit at the steel table under Rourke's rules, and begin writing the morning tasks before the oatmeal sticks to the pan. Water count, vent check, spring transfer, watch rotation, garden cover repair, radio at noon. The list is ordinary. That is the point. Outside, the outbreak keeps doing what it does. Roads fail, people move, the sick wander, hungry men look for doors. Inside, we keep the order of things. We keep the threshold. We keep the numbers honest. We keep moving.